and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your host, Michelle, and today we have Dave Chametzky with us, and I'm really excited about it. Did I say your name right? Because I feel like I missed a
You did.
letter.
Nope, no, you did. You got it all right,
Got it.
including the Z.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yay.
Woohoo!
I'm ridiculously excited because I briefly, ever so briefly met you in Nashville,
Mhm.
and then you reached out and was like, hey, are you looking for guests on your podcast? And I was like, yes, because you're a human that I wanted to get to know better, and it just didn't happen yet. So today is the day. So
Today's our day. It happens when the universe aligns, right? It doesn't matter when.
exactly.
It matters that it happens.
Exactly. So welcome. Two things I want to do. First, I'm going to set an intention. And then,
Mhm.
well, actually, first I'm going to say, because this is going to launch on Father's Day. So I just want to say happy Father's Day to all the father figures.
Okay, well, thank you. Happy Father's Day to all the figures. And one of my idols, Lou Bonagura, man. He's my ex-father-in-law, but I always want
um,
to wish him a happy Father's Day as well.
yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's see. In that line here, let's see. What is our intention or my intention? And I invite anyone to set their own or drop in on mine if it aligns. My intention today is really to get to know Dave. And in that, there's an added layer to that, and that is in that my intention is always that there will be some golden nugget or golden nuggets for the listeners out there. So that, I mean, really the intention of this whole podcast is to help people along their journey, whatever that looks like. And I feel like we can't engage with the audience in the same way we do, like you and I will today, Dave, but we do. Just hearing conversations can be so helpful.
For sure. I mean, that's what I have with my own podcast. It's just the conversations. You never know where there's a gem. I'll do my best, and I know you're going to do your best to get it out of me. But that's really what it is. You never know what people need to hear or what comes on in our conversations that it just said the right way, where it just connects. I mean, even today, getting on, and you were like, "Hey, can we just say Happy Father's Day?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I would love to mention because I've been thinking about mentioning my one of my heroes. I mean, really, he's a hero in my life. So you allowed me to do that, and I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. I think, and father figure, I think these days can get messy for some people, right?
Sure,
Like
sure.
sometimes it's filled with grief and sometimes it's filled with joy and sometimes it's a mixed bag and it's all of the above. And I think it's important to honor that too. Like Father's Day for me isn't so messy yet because my dad is still with us. Mother's Day for me is messy. And we happen to be
Sure.
recording this on the anniversary of her passing. And I'm feeling
Oh,
like
okay.
a bunch of love and gratitude. And I never know how that's going to go though, right? Sometimes it's love and gratitude and sometimes it's like intense sadness. So you never know. It's a
Yeah,
journey.
grief is really true. I've lost both my parents. Well, I didn't lose them. I know where they are, but
Yeah.
they're not here. But it really is one of those things that we move through the energies and what we feel. Sometimes we feel good about it. Not go celebrate a party, but we're also going to celebrate. I mean, it's a celebration of life. I know when I walk through those type of stories, it's empowering. It's what we choose to use the energy with.
Ah, beautiful. All right. So on that note, now I just want to dive in and say, tell me about you. Tell me just a little bit more about because you use language that is very much aligned with my my language. So I feel like we're
Yeah, for
very much
sure.
in the same energy world of, intention and light and energy and choices on how we move it and all of that.
Yeah, for sure. I would have never, if you would have told me 15 years ago, that I'd be doing these type of things, even speaking the way I am, I would have been told you there is something wrong in the world. There's no way that I would believe any of these things. But now, I've embraced the energy healing. I've done it myself. I am a energy healer, among other things. There's something to it. It's more than just coincidence when you do it. About manifestations. I mean, actually, today I'm a manifestation of exactly what I had done, almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago, when I said, when I hit 55, I'm going to get out of my corporate America career and my life is going to explode in a great way. And December was my birthday. The week after was the last day I was in the office because they eliminated my position. So it was something that I had no control over, but I'd been saying for, 18 plus years, and it happened. So manifestation and moving the energy is such a powerful thing to do. That's why when we can say about learning our love and moving the energies of the world, we can do it if we really set those intentions highly.
That's amazing. I like
Yeah.
you can't see my face because this is an audio thing, but
No,
when you said I set that intention however many years ago, and then it happened, but it wasn't your choice, right? Like like that it happened, and I'm like, oh, I have the goosebumps everywhere. This like
yeah,
100% aligned with your true purpose and your path, and you knew it then, even if you didn't know you knew it, you
yeah.
know.
Even then, when I first said it, I was just like, okay, as a joke, because of a lot of things would align at that time in my life, and many of those things did align with my life. But I was just like, okay, you have to have a date, right? So I put out a date, and it was just ridiculous. It was like at the beginning, I was like, all right, and I knew why my life would change differently, and I didn't know that it was going to change in the ways that it had. And that's the part. The universe will magnify our intentions when it knows it's for your highest good, and when you really want it and really need it. And that's the
Well,
thing.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's magical. I've seen it in so many parts of my life that it's not just like a lottery ticket, which I have not won the lottery in the New York State lottery or whatever, but in the life world of lottery, my life is like a lottery ticket. I love my life. I'm so blessed.
I feel the way. That's so beautiful. I think something I noticed in when you were speaking about that was like there wasn't a part of you that was hanging on. Like you surrendered. There was like you weren't trying to
Mhm.
control exactly. I mean, you set intentions and you like set goals and even dates for yourself, but none of what you were saying felt rigid to me. And I'm finding well, I found it on my own journey and I find it with clients as well that a lot of times we have this tendency to hang on to that control and be a little bit rigid to keep ourselves in that comfort zone. And it's like, but once we realize that outside of that comfort zone is where the magic happens, I think we have it's well, maybe it's not easier to surrender and let go of that, but there's a learning in that, like to
Oh,
surrender.
oh, for sure. I remember taking a medium course, and the guy said it's really easy once you surrender. And once you surrender, that's where it really comes into the power within ourselves. So it really comes down to a point of just, you know, being able to see it and surrender. So when I took that course on, when I took that course on how to be a medium, he said, you got to surrender. And I said, how do you do that? You just surrender, he said. And I'm like, okay, but how? You know, he goes, don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry even about what it's going to do or how it's going to happen. And that's the toughest part of what we do, because of we're humans. We live the human experience, and we have to know whys. We have to know hows instead of just trusting the universe. You know, a year before my job was eliminated, I was sitting in a workshop, and they do the DISC assessment. Those who don't know, it's like a personality assessment, and the whole group was doing it. I was as far out on C, which is like the woo woo people area, the real creative, spiritual people. I was so far out from where the rest of the cluster it was. And some people are like, oh, I don't feel bad. Sometimes they have like a mal, mal, I can't even say it. You're really outside. And I go, that's exactly where I belong. I don't belong here anymore. Though I was not looking to lose my job, but I was mentally prepared to know my next step. I didn't dive as much into all the things I was doing until that part. I didn't realize how much my job was holding me back in that way. That surrender, I wasn't brave enough to just jump and surrender. But when I was told to surrender, since that day, since that December 15th, I have done amazing things in the 6 months that I've experienced. I've been a photographer at a model photo shoot that, my pictures are going to be used in a book. I've done speaking engagements, which I've already done, but it's all coming to me, and including meeting. I mean, you know, being a sponsor at the Movement Maker when we met in Nashville. Just all these things just come into my world, and I'm so blessed in so many ways.
So, can I ask what you did before you jumped into embracing your
Yeah, I was
creativity?
in legal. I'm not a lawyer, but I was a very high level paralegal. I was a manager of intellectual property enforcement for a Fortune 50 company. So
So completely
I was
different.
yeah, I was deeply in the area. I mean, like again, supervisors were saying, Dave's in that woo woo. So, like when they list, which wasn't proper, but it was still done. But it was one of those things that we talk about, that you can go through what you want to do. You can shift and find that balance in your life. And the balance worked for me. I liked my job. But it wasn't fulfilling my true soul, my true purpose. And while I was doing other things, I mean, like this book behind me is, I wrote that book during the pandemic, or I put a lot of it together during the pandemic. I've written a couple of other books during the pandemic. There's a lot of different ways where we move our energy, and that's where I assist people to use their stories in life to then build it to further either their life or their business, or align the both. Be as authentic as possible.
So our listeners can't see the book behind you. Can you tell us what the title of your book is?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, of course. And I'd like everybody to think about the title, not just because it's my title of the book, but when your heart says it's your time to soar, think about those things in your life that when it's your time to level up, that moment, because these stories in there are talking about my Pathfinder perspective. I have these stories of my personal life, but I want to apply it to your life. I want you to think about that deep dive in your life. I had, your first love, and your first love, the first heartbeat we talk about is, I guess, ironically, because of what you shared today, is our mother's heartbeat. No matter what relationship you have, that's the first heartbeat we hear. And that's the first heartbeat we acknowledge. And from there, we go sometimes in the ashes of our life to then finding a better path and then taking our time to soar. And when our heart says soar, when our heart does aligns with the things that we want to do, that it makes it so much more special.
Oh, amazing. Without a doubt. And, for me, I think I spent a lot of time in my mind and I didn't even
Sure.
know what it was like to live from my heart until I embraced what I'm here for. I didn't know that at the time. And it's not that I didn't, I was very like kind and giving and loving and all of that, but I got my logic brain just got in my way. And I just love that it says your heart says your time to soar because that's it. If our heart and soul are telling us it's time and we can actually learn what it feels like to listen from there, everything changes. That's when my life changed. And I have just a quick little story about that. I took Thai language lessons
Mhm.
and when I was restructuring my business and rebranding and renaming, I wanted to honor the Thai language because I used to do Thai massage and it meant a lot to me and it's my home away from home and all those different things. And I asked my language teacher, I said, "Can I name my business Khao Jai?" which in Thai means I understand, but translated, like literally what it means is I take it from my mind and I bring it to my heart. And I'm like, that is it. Like that's all. And then my Thai teacher was like, no Thai person would ever name a business that. It doesn't make sense. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that then. But like, can you give me something similar? And then I landed on Jai D, which means kind hearted. And but I just was like, Khao Jai is like the most beautiful phrase in the world to me because it is what changed my life forever.
Sure. And one of the things that I talk about is, getting out of your head into your heart, and, finding the R in your heart. So, to me, what it is, there's so many R words when we think about it. But when you make that intention, like any other meditation, when you make the intention, what does it mean to you? And how does that mean for you to grow? So even the worst things that you might go through, if you could find the R in your heart, what is it, what resilience mean to you? What risks did you need to take to get out of that comfort zone? There's so many different pieces to it that become so much more powerful when we get out of our head, because our head is our protector. So if you do any sort of NLP, hypnosis, which I do, we want to get past the conscious. We want to get back into the ego in a good way, not really the super ego, because we want to really get past that protective layer of I can't, the training that we've had in our lives, the limiting beliefs. And once we do that, that's where the power really comes. Power comes from wanting to play and learning from that, right? Maslow's needs, hierarchy of needs, is protection. And that's the first level of protection is our conscious. Once we play around with the subconscious, we get to play, learn, and grow. And if we can take away the bad parts of the ego that say me, and you use it for our highest strength and retrain it, man, it just wants to play and life to really deliver.
Yeah, and I find that the more work I do and the further I don't know if that's right. I don't know if it's like I don't know that I like giving it a linear path like that, but the more work I do to understand and to understand which pieces of my thoughts, right? My mind, my thinking
Right,
mind
sure.
are accurate and true and which pieces are just bullshit stories that I had, I find that my mind can actually be a useful tool now, but it's because I'm in the healthy place
Oh,
versus in the right. It's like I'm not
oh
implying that you're
yeah.
only
Oh
living from
yeah.
the heart, but they go together when they're both coming from that healthy place versus from that protective, fearful, place. I don't know. I think it's such a fascinating journey to dive into both. And I love, I love, so I mean, you do hypnosis. What else do you do? Tell me more about what you do today.
So well, I help people write stories, but how I originally started is I started learning this technique called havening. I got my bachelor's degree. So back in the day with the Stone Age, I chiseled out a bachelor's degree for behavioral sciences. That being said, from the University of Maryland. That being said, I never used it. I was in legal. I was working in legal, and I loved my job. I really enjoyed a lot of aspects to it. Then I left a law firm, and I went to corporate America, worked for one of the top 50 companies in the world, and it was great. I had some great experiences. I did that for 30 years. But the real true is then I also had all these limiting beliefs. So
Mm.
at some point, I was having some challenges in my life that I was willing to accept. But sometimes we push it under the rug. And I had done that unintentionally. And because society tells us, don't worry about it. Come on, that's not so bad. All those things. But if it holds us back, those are the things we need to grow through. And I learned about havening, which is a psychosensory touch modality to help through healing through traumas as well as also peak performance. So it's not only about all the negative things. It's when we set our minds in a completely different way because our fight or flight response system, our amygdala, is always on hypervigilance, but it also unfortunately summarizes everything. So we make quick decisions because of the trauma that we had previously made. So I learned this. I started in therapy, and I was like, why am I doing this so quickly? My therapist was like, I've never seen anybody do this. He goes, you're really like diving into this. I go, that's all I do. I was in a really dark place. Didn't know I was going to be in an even darker place at some point in my life. But I was like, okay, I really want to work on myself. And I thought I did. And I then became certified in these techniques, as well as being certified in various levels of hypnosis. And the hypnosis isn't just, hey, I'm going to turn you into a chicken. I always joke with people. They go, yeah, you're going to turn me into a chicken. I go, I can if I want, but that's not what I would want to do. And then, I've also done hypnosis and NLP, which is just changing our language. So, when people say, oh, I want to lose weight, I'm that annoying guy. I'm like, no, you don't. They're like, yeah, I do. I need to lose weight. I'm like, no, you want to eliminate it or reduce it. Is that right? Oh, yeah, that sounds nicer. Yeah, talk to yourself that way. Because our mind, that child part of our mind is trained. If you lose something, I got to go find it. Let's not find that weight if you want to reduce it. Look, I've seesawed on my weight, so I'm not gonna tell you, but I know how to reduce it pretty quickly. When I work on that part of me, my health, that's something that I'm always able to reduce well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Hypnosis
all these
fascinates
techniques
me.
because we have all these things, and I've been a storyteller most of my life, and not only the book that I have, then I started writing. I mean, just last year, I had gone through a little bit of a dark period, and I was like, I got to write a book, and I did. I wrote a book called Redemption about this young girl who was going through her late teens, mid teens to the late teens, uh, help running a horse farm with her mom. I've never been a woman. I don't plan on being a woman, but it was a story. And what I was really happy about, everybody makes those pushes to be Amazon #1 bestseller. That book became Amazon #1 bestseller in a few countries. So it just by accident, because I had a lot of people who started picking it up. And in fact, one of the great stories about that book is one of my friend's daughters was like, I need to talk to the author because you know the author. So it was this little 12-year-old girl who told me about my book and she enjoyed it. And when is this going to happen? Why is this happening? And what's going to happen next? I had no intentions of writing a second book or a trilogy to it, but it's on my list now to do.
Nice.
Because I had never written a book, a story book. But we all have stories, and I've worked with people to work on their story to align with themselves if it wasn't aligned. A lot of times people want to write a book, they can't, right? We always hear that they can't. And I go, let's kick the can't down the road and make it to a can. And a lot of times it's the limiting belief. I can't do it because the story's too hard. I can't do it because I went through something so horrible. I was like, well, I can help you like that. And as part of that process, I help people write books or get on stages or, as like you and I do, have podcasts because you want to be a speaker. You got to it's like going to the gym. You got to do it all the time and get better at speaking by being a podcast host. You get better at listening. And those are the things I do is I help people do that. And I have it aligned all together with our most authentic self and it becomes a home run.
I love all of that. And one of the things I was just like thinking about your story and you talking about other people's stories. I think one thing I want to really like make crystal clear to our listeners is if you feel like your story isn't aligned, like if it feels like something's off about it, and what might feels like it might actually be aligned, and they feel like really far apart. Like Dave's story is a perfect example of it doesn't matter how far apart they are. You can go from legal to woo woo, as we, to the spiritual side, to the energy side. So if anything feels misaligned or not aligned as your story today, go ahead and take the leap and allow yourself to dream and to consider and listen to your heart about where you might want to go. And you don't have to know the end result. Like you don't, but you can.
And that's why you have people to guide you through those things. Because
Yeah.
I really sometimes in the world that we live in, a lot of people go, I got to rebrand. I'm like, no, you need to find out what your brand is. No, I got a brand. I have a logo. It looks beautiful. I spent hundreds of dollars on the logo. Okay, that's a logo. It still doesn't tell me who you are, what you do, or are you aligned with the right language to make that brand alive. Just because you have a brand and you change logos or change looks, that's not it. If you really want to have a strong brand, it really is tying like your strong story. You want to have something strong. It's more than just saying, I want to do it. That's the first step. How do you do it and move it forward?
Yeah, and what makes it strong, right? It's
Yep,
it's
for
it's
sure.
it's the heart. It says, your heart says it's time to your time to soar. That's it. I mean, if it doesn't speak to your heart, I don't know. I've just found so many times I tried to fit in or tuck into places I thought I was supposed to, societally, culturally, familially. That's a hard word to say.
Yeah.
But and once I stopped doing that and started asking myself, which is sometimes still hard for me. Sometimes asking myself what I want or what I need. It's like I never asked that for the first 40 some years of my life, or 30 some years of my life. It's like now at 54, I'm asking myself that question and I listen to the answer as opposed to avoid it or.
I 100%. That's the authenticity. That's why I had that green suit. You know, to me, that most people would, oh, I couldn't do that. I'm like, okay, that's you. To me, that's my Superman suit. That's my suit that I know that's who I am most authentically. That's why on my podcast logo it says Uncle Dave, and I've had people go, oh, that's not good. People don't have good relationships with uncles. I'm like, well, okay, but that's not who they are. I'm going to be who I am. Either you like me or you don't. And, there's usually not a gray area. It's
Yeah.
usually you like me or you don't, and that's okay. That's all right. And I tell that even with people that I work with, because I want them to find the right person. And that's why finding the right person or the right path for you, and that's where we break those patterns. And, as you get older, you start breaking those patterns. And I wish I didn't learn a lot of this stuff in my 50s, in my late 40s. I wish I'd be the person who I was earlier, but I'm not. This is what it took me to get here. And that's why I enjoy getting the stories, helping entrepreneurs and others write books. I do a lot of ghostwriting with people who need to tell their family story. And not because it's going to be an Amazon bestseller. And I've been doing this more and more. If you have a holiday, wouldn't you, well, especially, and, with your dad, wouldn't you love to hear all the stories now, today, that he wants to share than in the future? Statistically speaking, we're gone out of the universe's energy after 2 generations. Most people, not all the time. And if you think about it, how often do you talk about your great grandparents?
Mm.
Even if you met them, and if you didn't meet them, it might be completely out of your radar. And that's what we have to also think about. But if you have a story, I know I used to love listening to my grandfather and one of my uncles telling stories. And one of my regrets is I didn't record all those stories. So I've been trying to rewrite them, and I've been working with veterans and other people to get their stories. And I said, look, wouldn't that be a great Christmas gift? I go to really know about stories about why you love dad, if that was the case, or what you really went through. What does it really feel like for you? We go with your guns blazing. To do whatever you need to do for your family. If you really care about people, let them know your story. It doesn't have to be about a business. It's always helpful for that. Besides, that's how I created my comic book. Also, I also have a comic book.
Oh, cool. That's cool. I love hearing people's stories, every people's stories. But as you
Yep.
were talking, I was like, I went through it wasn't even a phase. It was just, I was really curious about my heritage and about my family.
Mm.
And I went through a whole genealogy thing and I asked my dad and my uncles and, I don't, if I remember right, like my grandparents weren't still with us when I went through that phase. So I was like relying on my dad and, his brothers and my mom and her sisters to like remember things. And it was fascinating to hear like so many things I didn't know about how they grew up or like experiences that they had. And then once you hear that, it's like I don't know, for me, I think I was at an age, I want to say I was in, college when I did it. And it's like you realize the humanness of your parents. Because previous to that, I feel like they were my parents. That's a different category. They're not human. They're my parents. They're superhuman. And then once I started digging into that and hearing their stories, it's like, oh, you have a lot of pain in your story, too. And you have a lot of things you overcame. And then they start talking about their parents, and you're like, oh my gosh, what they had to, I don't know. It was just I love people's stories
I,
all
I
kinds.
love doing the deep dive, and that was one of the things that I started actually helping me heal. Is I didn't have a good relationship for most of my life, actually, basically all of my life with my dad, and but at times I learned how to forgive him, and because of the things that we experienced. And I know the last words I said on this planet were "I love you," and I meant it. It wasn't just I said it because we knew it was close to the end, and at that point, he knew I was the only safe person
Mm.
because of his Alzheimer's and a lot of other things. They used to come to the nursing home and they'd be like, he says when his son comes in, everything's going to change. And I go, I guess he has a different son. He's never said anything nice to me about me. But,
Well, and
I
I
had done a
do.
photo, I did a photo shoot and I said, Dad, here's the program. And he didn't go, oh, congratulations. They spelled your name wrong. I go, okay, thanks.
I will say, as we're talking about families, I want to make it clear, like I do find often, many, many times, if not most times, that family can be the trickiest relationships for people, right? Because they're the
Yeah,
people who've
sure.
known us the longest, they have the most history, they have the most like preconceived or like patterns and history. But that doesn't mean it has to be ignored. In fact, some of those hardest relationships, when we look at them and then choose ourselves within healing them, can be a really beautiful and magical thing. But I just want to honor and understand the
Oh,
complexity of what
uh,
that looks like.
yeah, no, 100%. That's true. Again, even with my dad, most of my relationship wasn't good. But at the end, I met him where he was at, not
Yeah.
where I wanted to be at. And the challenge with our family, they do program us a little bit, a lot.
Sometimes a lot. Yeah.
And a lot of it's through love. I mean, even my mom, you know, we would push through love, not necessarily in a way that would help growth, but she didn't mean it, right? And you said when you realize your parents. Remember, they're growing up just as we're growing up. No
Right.
matter when they are, and if you're a parent, then you also know that they don't give you a guidebook on how to do all these things. And if you're already in a place where you don't understand how to manage the emotions and things like that, it's more of a challenge for and that's where I learned how to do a lot more forgiveness,
Mhm.
even for myself. So when I've made mistakes in life, and yes, I've made mistakes, I now understand why. And even today, when I make a mistake, I go, okay, why did I do it? How did it make me feel? And how can I learn from that mistake? So it's not just having a mistake, it's also learning how we move through it.
That was one of the biggest aha helpful things for me on my journey. Because when I used to make a mistake, I told myself I was a failure, I was unlovable, I'd never get anything right, all these things. And then once I reframed that and shifted my perspective, and now when I make a mistake, it's like, all right, cool. What can I learn from this? How can I do better next time? Well, how does it make me feel? All those things that you said, it's like my biggest thing is like, what am I learning? Because there's something to
Yep.
learn. There's always something to learn from it. And some lessons are way more painful than others, you know?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is amazing. I'm wondering if you have any, like, if there was one thing you could tell our listeners or one thing you wanted to know about you, maybe, or both. What would those things be?
Well, I want to know where I'm going. I mean, I have an idea. I know where my North Star is, and I'm doing it. Actually, I'm really living it. As I said, life is great. But what I would tell everybody to do is to really dive into yourself. Don't be
Mhm.
scared of the monsters under your bed. I mean, I know there's the scary things in our heads, things like that. When you work through it and you shine light on it, it becomes less scary. Put the light, that love light, and there's a big change. You have to experience it for yourself, and even if you've experienced it in a small way, the deeper you dive, it's not a rabbit hole. It really is a beautiful place when you can be heart centered and find the right path, and then soar. Think about when most people like to be on the window seat in a plane. The higher you go, why do you like to do it? You like to see how far we can see, right? We hate when it's bad weather, not only It might be scary for some, but it's because we can't see. We want to see as far as we can. And that's what you can do in your own life is when you clear some of those things, it allows you to soar and fly like the phoenix.
Oh, I love that. And I think I want to circle back to something you said earlier that's such an important piece, and that is have a mentor, have a guide. Allow yourself to be held, allow yourself to be guided, allow yourself figuratively held. I'm not saying you have to allow somebody to hold you. You can if you want to find your
Yeah,
safe
right.
people. I'm just saying allow yourself to surrender to help, ask for help, lean into those mentors and guides and what you offer and the different ways that you support people on their journey is really beautiful. Like I'm gonna have more questions for you.
Yeah, no, I love it because and not because I do it. Because people go, oh, so you just it's all about you. I'm like, no, I want you to learn it for yourself. Like one of the first things when I learned havening usually if you go Google it, it's the practitioner touching with approval the client or the person, and I'm like, no, I the way I would rather prefer is teach you how to take care of yourself. And I've said to this to people I've worked with, if I'm working with you 6 months on the same issue, we've wasted our time. That
Mm.
doesn't mean there's not going to be new issues or new ways to look on things. But I really think that once we empower ourselves to do the right things and learn the right ways, make our mistakes when we make those mistakes, but learn from those mistakes. Because you could tell me anything when I'm doing something wrong. I'd rather you tell me what I'm doing, and then I can kind of figure out and ask questions about it and learn from my mistake rather than feeling bad that I made a mistake and be punished. That you did something wrong, Dave. You're not good. You all those limiting beliefs that we have, and when we overcome them, life becomes a whole new ball game.
Yeah, and I think having that outside support is so helpful in helping us figure out what is right for us. Because even sometimes somebody telling us something that worked for them maybe isn't exactly right for us, but it gives us a clue as to where we might go to find what is exactly right for us. And I just think that's all part of the beautiful process of growth and healing and holding space for each other and leaning into each other and having amazing communities and people like doing the work, people like us doing the work. There's a lot
Yep.
of people out there like us doing the work. I'm not saying we're in a different like better place. I'm just saying doing the work is a thing. And when you actively are in that, to have a community of people doing similar things in their own way is so powerful.
Yeah, when you find your own resources, and it's more than just reading books. Because there's a lot of people where we as a society get caught up in the I know that already, the ICTA disease I call it. I know it already, and really knowing it and doing it. So one of the stories that you might not know is 5 years ago I tried to, even though I knew a lot of these things, I tried to kill myself.
Mhm.
I went through a 36-hour period of actively attempting suicide a few different ways, and I'm not really good at suicide, which is a good thing because from there I took that as a huge growth. But I knew all the right resources. I had helped people through difficult pieces. I knew I had a therapist. I had people who could have helped me if I wanted the help, but I didn't use it. I didn't utilize my resources. And at that time, I didn't even know all the resources I had that I know now today. And it's more than just reading a book and, oh, okay, now I understand the answers. It's applying it, it's doing it, it's owning that gym membership and going to the gym. It doesn't matter that you own something. You have a passport, and I have a story about a passport. You have a passport, you've got to go to another country. It's almost imperative that you decided to get that passport and live. And the reason why I have a story, I have a friend who passed away unexpectedly around our age. And as I was cleaning out his house, I found an envelope and it had a passport. And I bring it around when I do some speaking. It was unpunched.
Mhm.
Never had gone anywhere. He had the means to go everywhere he had to. Now he travels in my pocket with his passport, but he's not going anywhere. Again, I know where he is. And that's the crime in life. We make promises to ourselves, follow through on those promises. You need to ask somebody for help, right? When we get lost, in the old days, we would ask for directions. Now we just have GPS. We don't have to talk to anybody. It is so much better, as you said, being part of a community where we can ask or feel safe to say, hey, I messed up, man. How do I fix it? And sometimes we can fix all the mess ups, and sometimes we can. But how we get through it, that's a guarantee on learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful story.
I, I have a few of them. That was where I'm writing all these stories, and I'm like, this really happened. Like, when people have read the story is that I put in your heart says it's your time to soar. I had a girlfriend who was hit by a drunk driver. I was the last person to speak to her. So I had survivor guilt. There's some good stories in there also, but you start looking at all the stories of your life, and you're like, wow, as we get older, I've lived through some things. How'd I get through it? And that's also a reminder for your audience: is no matter what you're going through, 99.9% you're going to make it through it. You might not know how today because it's so heavy and so dark, but in the future, again, I attempted suicide. I was one of those rare people who was very comfortable in my decision. You always hear about people who like jump off a bridge and go, "Oh my God, I shouldn't have done that." I was as comfortable as I could have been. I wrote 50 letters to people who I cared about to explain that this was my decision and nobody else could have chosen to help me. I didn't want the help. This was not, situational. It was just like, I'm done. There was situations that brought me into that place, but it was my decision. It wasn't because of any one decision. And for me, that was the real power to do that. That's why I felt comfortable. 50 letters. Think about, just handwritten letters, not typed up letters. I spent most of that day writing letters to try to help people through the grief of what I thought was going to happen. And nobody's got to see those letters because now that I'm here, I shred them so that way there's no misunderstanding. And because now I also make sure that almost every day I tell people I love them and I make them feel uncomfortable, especially my male friends. And I'm like, I love you. And yeah, I love you, Dave. Yeah. I'm like, no, it's really, and it's not. One person once came over to me and said, Dave, I don't look at you that way. I go, no, I'm not asking for a romantic. I go, that's not. I go, I unconditional. So if you do something wrong to me, fine, I'm going to forgive you. And at the end of the day, I can still send you love and not be with you. I've had people I love every day. Two of my blended daughters and my ex-wife. I send love to them every day, but they don't talk to me, and that's their choice, and I respect that. You can send love to anybody. This is an energy. And as we move that energy, man, there's so much power in that by owning your own love and that unconditional, that no matter what happens, I will forgive you. And love is always out there.
Well, and the other side of that, like you said, is you can love them and forgive them and still not have them in your life. Like
Correct.
that can
Right.
be true too. And sometimes that's the healthiest way, even though sometimes it's also the hardest way, at least at first. There's so many layers to that. We could dive into a whole nother 2 hour
Yeah,
podcast about
right. And that's
about
where
that.
perspectives come into it, is how you're hearing what I'm saying. Not you particularly, but how
Yeah.
somebody's hearing what you're saying and what they're experiencing. If they come in with preconceived ideas, there's a whole load of things, and that's why it's also helpful to have a therapist, a mentor, to see those things, even in business or for your mental wellness. And I really stress mental wellness, and among learning all these techniques, I now use them as well as other resources to make sure that when I'm feeling less good, I don't go back to that really dark place.
Yeah. Well, and I love what I heard in that statement was you live your practice, which is why
Mm-hmm.
you can guide and help people within it, right? Like like you talked about
Yeah,
earlier.
sure.
You're not just
Yeah,
reading a book and regurgitating what you read. You're actually living you're living
yeah. I
what you're
I've
putting
lived it
out.
and have the souvenirs from the souvenir shop. But and that's the difference with somebody who, I know this. I know this. I learned it in school. That's why when you're a doctor, they put you in medical school, not to just learn more stuff. But that's where the practical stuff is, right? That's where you do the biopsies. That's where you do the autopsies and things like that. That's where you learn, because you don't want to have somebody who goes, "Oh, I didn't know the heart belongs there. Oh, I'm confused." Right? You want to make sure that you have somebody. That's why I call myself a mentor versus a coach. I've been in the darkness. While your darkness might be different than mine, I understand with that empathetic feeling that really I understand some of what you've experienced. And you just sometimes have to also just hold space and sit with somebody and not do anything, which is was my my challenge with that wife. I was, I wanted to be the protector. She was being verbally attacked by people, and as the protector, I gave her what I thought was protection. She didn't feel it that way, and those miscommunications then snowball with a lot of things. Because that's why communication and knowing our story, knowing other people's stories, and how to talk to them. There's that great book about love language. If you
Mm.
don't go with a partner and your language is different than the other person, you don't always understand it, and that sometimes causes a lot more challenges. Sometimes people, as men, we want to be protectors and healers, but a lot of times people just want to be heard. My wife just needed to be heard versus being protected and, cause problems. And at that time, there's still more learning that I needed to have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a journey. There's always more to
Okay.
learn, and there's always the communication thing is huge, and I feel like communication is harder when you're not listening from the heart, when you're worried about what other people are thinking, you're worried about how you wanna show up, but we can't quite get all the way to the other side and understand how they might want to show up or what they might need, and I think that's a really it's a challenging skill to develop, and it's one that always needs refining. At least that's how I find it in my world.
Oh, for sure, you need to refine it. You need to check it. I mean, again, I'll go back to the book. So I knew one of the nicknames I used to have growing up was Kid Ego. I lived in it like, oh, this is I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm protecting, which is also a trauma response. I didn't know that until I learned that. But then when my book was on one of the billboards in Times Square, so I wanted there's a fine balance of, hey man, I'm a New Yorker, so being in Times Square, holy moly, but also to remember and how I was able to focus that and make sure it wasn't an ego event was while my book was up there was thousands of people in Times Square. Nobody cared. Even though I was with a group of people who were yelling and screaming and all this other stuff, I looked around, nobody's life changed. And that helped me go, okay, this is just a Dave event, which is great. And you should celebrate the accomplishments you had. That was my first book that I put out solo. It wasn't just a compilation book. It was a book
Mm.
that I did, the solo book. All of the writing, for better or for worse, is mine. But I was really proud of it. And at the end of that book is a picture that I love talking about. Is a picture of my mom's hand on mine. It was the last time I was physically with her a few months before she transitioned, and that's when I came up with the first heartbeat we hear is our mom, and I made sure I would have loved to let her see this book or read the book. It's a
Yeah.
voracious reader. We probably would have finished it in about 15.
Yeah. Gosh, when you told that story, I think about so many times when I'm speaking with people on their journey, so often we look for external validation, which is, you looked around and realized no one was seeing it, but then you were still able to own your own celebration and be happy and proud of your accomplishment. And I think that when we can get to that place where the external validation is nice, sure, but we don't need it to be happy. We don't need it to celebrate. We don't need it to understand that we did something that matters to us and that will impact people. It just might not impact all of Times Square, you know?
Right. The people there's been people who've read my book who then reached out to me and talked to me about it and then knew me better because they read it. And that was a part. So when I attempted the suicide, I said Kid Ego died that day because the next
Mm.
day I had to go tell my kids exactly what I did. And if that doesn't kick your ego right where it needs to be kicked, so that's why I always now manage my ego. In like there's times I'm here. Look, I'm gonna be talking on this podcast, right? So there's a little bit of ego, but I want to share it and now I've also learned from that experience is also, even though I might want to protect or I might want to share something, I need to make sure what the other person needs, not what I need. If it's about me, I'll get myself into trouble. That's what has always led me into trouble and seeing those patterns in my life. If it's only about me, but when it's about other people, the universe really aligns with you. And that's really what's going on in my life right now. Between my charitable work, and all the other things, everything's lining up in such a beautiful way. And I just need to say I am so blessed in almost every area of my life.
That's amazing. So on that note, how can people find all the amazing things that you're doing? And well, you mentioned a charitable event or your
Yeah.
charity. So like tell us how we find you so that if we are called to support or lean in or reach out, and how do they do that?
Well, the really great thing is my name is really unique. So David Chametzky. So it's davidchametzky.com is my website.
Okay.
Social media, I am David Chametzky. So I'm fairly easy. I also have a charity called Goons for Good. If you go to goons number four good.org, you'll see us and all the work we're doing. Actually, I guess if this is coming out and you're in the New York area, there's a comedy, which I do a little comedy as well. There's a comedy show raising charity for the Mount Vernon Food Kitchen on June 26th in Westchester, New York. If you're in that area, that would be great. Come on down. And I also have a podcast, Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. So there's a lot of different ways. If you Google David Chametzky, I guarantee you'll find a number of places to find me out.
Beautiful. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time with me today. I really enjoyed getting to know you. I look forward to more conversations. I think that's a wrap for today. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, it feels great. This was great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate getting to know me and getting to know you, and that's why we'll continue the relationship and build it and make it stronger. That's what community is all about.
Absolutely, without a doubt. All right, I love it. That's a wrap for today. Bye. Be you every day.